Roberts, legislative coffee. Before we begin, I'll ask that you please silence your cell phones, and we will ask for you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the Constitution which founded our republic, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, good morning. It's a beautiful day. We appreciate you being here. My name is Mitch Shred. I'll be your moderator today. Our format will be the same as it's been for several years now. There's a box in the back that you can write out a question. We'll try to cover as many topics by as many different individuals as possible. You will have the opportunity for a follow-up question, not a comment, not a conversation. If you want that, your legislators will be around after the event for that. We do want to thank today's sponsors. Hy-Vee, our series sponsor, our gold sponsors, Ameristar Casino Hotel, Black Hills Energy, Iowa Western Community College, Pinnacle Bank, Feltner, Peterson Smith, Roosh, Thomas Simpson LLP. We thank them for sponsoring this. Without them, this wouldn't be done. We'd also like to thank Woodrow Wilson School for letting us be here again. This is a great facility, and I'd like to thank particularly Dr. Bruckner for that. And we've not seen you, but we've missed you. But congratulations on being rated the top superintendent in the state of Iowa. So congratulations. I think that speaks a lot for our community when we have the superest superintendent in the state. So congratulations again. I want to thank John Kula and Marge Haley for interpreting today. And we will begin with introductions. And like always, your representatives like to know who you are as much as you want to learn from them. So with that, why don't we start right here with Mr. Cool.
I'm John Poole.
My name's Travis. With the deaf grassroots. My name's Brett Walsh with ISD. Don Van Solen. I'm active in the deaf community.
I'm Seth Kolar, Council Bluffs fireman here too. I'm Steve Harmon. My cat, Council Bluffs.
I'm Penny Steinhardt with Iowa Friends of Companion Animals. Leanne Walker, Council Bluffs, and Iowa Friends of Companion Animals.
Jana Aldrich, interested parent of a student that attends Council Bluffs School District.
Nicole Lindquist, Iowa West Foundation.
Matt Garcia, Boy Scouts. Jim Ware.
Tim Prythorn, resident of Council Bluffs.
Brad Haley, I'm with Hy-Vee.
Dory Decker, and I'm with Hy-Vee. Jessica Mandragore, with Children's Square. With Children's Square.
Cindy Keithley, certified financial planner.
George Gillespie, retired.
Nancy Willis.
Steve Holtman.
Eddie Hendricks.
Bob Hendricks with Hy-Vee and Little Center School Board.
Joanne Hester, Honey Creek.
John Erickson, Iowa Drainage District and Levy Association.
Bubba Heinrich.
Good morning, Jay Phillips, Viridian Credit Union and City of Council Bluffs Civil Service Commissioner.
Art Randolph, Council Bluffs.
Sharon Hyde, Council Bluffs City Council. Naomi Lyman, Hy-Vee Shopper.
Art Bill Auditor with the Iowa Supreme Court.
Jim Nelson, retired.
John Lewis, retired.
Nicole Hughes, Tucker Pearson Law Firm, and Karen Sheldon.
Bob Munt with the Chamber.
Walt Kazire, retired.
Nancy Kazire.
Jeff Jorgensen, Chairman, Potawatomi County Republican Central Committee.
Frank Bryce, Director of Legacy and Dignity, Southwest Iowa Center for Independent Living.
Roger Vaughn from Columbus, Iowa.
Brian Jack Holder, primary candidate for Iowa House District 22.
Dennis DeVaul, retired teacher, Council Bluffs.
Beth DeVault, Methodist, Jenny Edmondson.
Karen Collins, Methodist, Jenny Edmondson.
Terrence Levin, Methodist, Jenny Edmondson.
Richard Buckmaster, retired.
Jim Anderson, retired ag business.
Billy Ingeroth, student of Council Bluffs Community Schools.
Cindy Engeroth, Iowa School for the Deaf and Iowa Educational Services for the Blind and Visually Impaired.
Cheryl McConkey, retired.
Kelly Betts Elston, Connections Area Agency on Aging.
Morgan Morrison, Connections Area Agency on Aging, also a member of the Council Bluffs Chamber Board.
Marty Shudak, Council Bluffs Schools.
George Broadway, Council Bluffs Community Alliance.
Council Bluffs Airport Authority, Andy Miller.
Bill Beatty, retired iron worker, Local 21.
Keith Fraser, Council Bluffs, retired.
Steve Gorman, Council Bluffs firefighter, Democratic candidate for Iowa House District 16.
Bill Grove, Council Bluffs School Board.
Lois Grove, retired.
Jeff Novotny, Activities Director at Abraham Lincoln High School.
Martha Bruckner, Iowa taxpayer, willing to pay for both schools and water.
Jason Ryan, Council Bluffs Schools.
Kelly Diggs, Potawatomi County Community Foundation.
Janet Ryan, Council Bluffs Schools.
Todd Barnett, Principal, Thomas Jefferson High School.
Julie Smith, Council Bluffs Schools.
Mark Scholl, Council Bluffs Community Schools.
Tracy Matthews, Council Bluffs Community Schools.
Dan Kenny, Iowa Western.
Bill Forrestal.
Annette Hines Snyder.
Bill Riley.
Susan Ryder, Council Bluffs School Board member.
Chris Burke.
You gotta introduce yourself, Chris.
Sorry, Chris Burke.
You know, I'm always impressed by how diverse and distinguished this group is, and there's a lot of knowledge in this room.
What's that?
And then there's us. There's no distinguished.
Well, with that, we will go ahead and start with opening statements.
Well, good morning, everybody. In addition to being diverse, I know some people are bundled for winter, but Travis here, of course, is ready for summer. So here we go. It's a lot of activity up in the Capitol this past week. We got through funnel, and now we're pushing bills out, pushing them over to the Senate so they can act on them, hopefully. And the Senate, of course, doing likewise. If you go back 7 or 8 years, you may recall that there was a nationwide financial downturn. And during that time, we were fortunate that our farm economy is very strong, and so Iowa did not suffer quite as badly as other states did. But right now, the farm economy is down. John Deere is laying people off because nobody is buying equipment. And so what are we doing for farmers and the other small businessmen? Well, we're increasing their taxes by about $90 million. Over a month ago, the House sent a coupling bill over to the Senate and with the 179 deduction, and nothing has happened. And on Tuesday, cash basis farmers are paying their taxes, and they'll have to pay more than they were planning on. So that's really unfortunate. Another thing that happened this week is that the federal government gave the okay for Iowa to go forward with its Medicaid modernization program, which will begin on April 1st. So thank you.
I too will be brief. This is the time of the session, and he mentioned the funnel. The funnel is that mechanism. I know half the audience at least knows what it is, but for the half, or for the third perhaps that doesn't know what the funnel is, this is our process for narrowing down the number of bills we deal with every session. Coming in January, whole bunch of legislators, 150 legislators, introduced hundreds of bills, and we've got to figure out which ones we're going to take up. So we created this funnel system and it's called the funnel because it ever narrows the number of bills that we're going to deal with in the legislature. So last Friday was the last day to get bills out of committee in their House of origin. That means the Senate bills out of Senate committee and the House bills out of House committee. For the next 3 weeks, we pass those Senate files that did come out of committee over to the House, and they do the same fun. So there's a whole lot of floor activity, not so much committee activity until kind of towards the end of next week, when we have to start taking the House files that we've received in the Senate, and they have to take the Senate files they've received in the House and get them out of committee by 2 weeks from yesterday. Okay, and so lots of floor activity. In particular, this last week, kind of for both chambers, well, maybe a little different in both chambers, but we tend to get the ones that are non-controversial and that are pretty much agreed to. We tend to get those out of the way. And then next week, we'll start to get into the bills that still have some controversy with them and are still working through the process where people are talking about and working on amendments to those. So that's the place we are in that process. There have been things happening on 179. There have been discussions back and forth between leaders in the House and the Senate. I'm cautiously optimistic we will find some resolution to that issue, but it's going to involve cooperation and compromise on both sides. And so stay tuned on that subject. We're trying to work through that and trying to get to a place where we can both afford to be responsive to maybe 30,000 farmers in the state of Iowa, maybe 25,000 small businesses in terms of taxes, and at the same time have enough resources to do at least a halfway decent job or a mediocre job on funding K-12 education. So that's where we sit right now. It's kind of a lot of funnel activity in the next couple of weeks, and so I look forward to your questions.
Well, hi, I want to thank everybody for coming. I'm going to be shorter than everybody else. I'm Charlie McConkey. I'm state representative for District 15. That's west side of Council Bluffs and Carter Lake. I'm not going to. I'll be shorter than everybody else because they did a really good job explaining what's going on. It's been a really busy week in the House, getting through the funnel. Now we got to get all of our bills out to the Senate. We've got a short period to do that. But I want to thank everybody for coming. I'm looking forward to the questions.
Well, good morning. I want to thank you all for coming too. I may not be quite as brief because I may not be back. As you probably noticed, the changes in the schedule of the dates, and of course I had the dates that were originally scheduled plugged in, planning to be here, and I have no idea. Of course, these dates are changed because of county and state district conventions, so I don't know what the other places are going to be like. So but I've already committed to being every Saturday from here to the end of the session to be someplace. So I may or may not make it back on the 19th and April 2nd. Don't think I'm leaving mad because I'm not. Everybody's pretty well spoke as to what we've been doing. It's been really busy. We've been getting through a lot of bills. Occasionally there are bills that still need some work and looking at and discussion, and so those things are in that process. And it's better to do that than it is to rush them through and then find out, oops. So there are people that have legitimate issues with some things, and trying to get those resolved. So when we, despite what you may think, we do absolutely want to try to get it right. And so it takes some time. Sometimes it takes time to do that. I will address the one thing that was mentioned, and I'm glad to hear Senator Gronstal say we may be able to get to some kind of resolution on the tax coupling. That's what we call it, just brevity's sake. It is unfortunate, though. There are people out there who are, and I saw this via social media, and to quote it, the legislature's decisions to give $95 million in tax breaks to corporate interests on the backs of our students in schools, and its decisions to steal from the penny sales tax promised to our schools to clean up Iowa's water. I think that's disingenuous for someone to say that, because nothing like that has been decided. And I really bothers me when they tell their people that that's what's happening. And when they say tax breaks to corporate interests, I can tell you that tax coupling affects families. We're not talking about tax breaks to corporate interests like General Motors, that seems to be something along that line. No, these are people out there that did business the way they thought they needed to do business, and this is gonna come back to bite them. But I just gotta get that out, 'cause like I say, I may not be back, so, it bothers me when statements like that are made that are absolutely incorrect, and I think it's done just to inflame people. I don't have any problem discussing difference of opinions, but you're entitled to your own opinions. You're not entitled to your own facts. Thank you.
Well, good morning, and again, thanks to everyone for being here today. I'm State Representative Mary Ann Hanusa. I represent House District 16, which is roughly the eastern and southern portions of Council Bluffs. And with all due respect to Senator Gronstal, I think maybe there is a little diversity up here as the only woman up here, so I'll take credit. But having said that, anyway, I know it's been a very busy week, as all of my colleagues have stated, and it was very enjoyable to see a lot of Council Bluffs faces with us representing different groups at the Capitol this week. It seemed like every time you turned around this week, there was somebody there from Council Bluffs, so that was fun. And I don't want to belabor my introduction, but I did have somebody come to me at the end of last coffee, and they said, you know, you throw around these words all the time, coupling and tax breaks and tax cuts and all this kind of thing, and I don't understand what that means. So just to clarify, for some of you who may not be as much in the weeds on this as we are up here, the coupling that we talk about really has nothing to do with eBay, but it actually has to do with the process of matching the state tax law with federal code, and as federal code is changed, laws are changed every year, and this is a matter of routine. We've done this every year that I've been in the legislature, and well before that. It usually is never a partisan issue. It usually is a very bipartisan, zero, unanimous vote. But this year, the House has sent a bill over to the Senate to match those tax codes, and the Senate has not taken it up. What that means is that many people across the state, small business owners, farmers, teachers, anyone who takes some of these deductions that they are used to taking off their taxes are not going to be able to do so, which ultimately will result in higher taxes for them. And so I know that I've talked to tax preparers who are somewhat frustrated, I guess, because they have stacks of tax returns that are on their desk waiting to be filed. They cannot file because they don't know what action the legislature is going to take. So I don't want to make that a partisan issue. I just wanted to explain what that was, because I think there were some people here last week and previous weeks who maybe weren't quite clear on what we meant by that. But again, thanks so much. Look forward to your questions, and thanks again for being here.
Senator Shipley mentioned he won't be here. I failed to bring this up, but because the party conventions are March 12th and April 9th, they conflict with our previously scheduled Saturday legislative coffees. We've worked with Wilson Middle School and rearranged some dates. So we canceled March 12th and the 26th, and our two remaining coffees will be on March 19th and April 2nd.
And Vanna Munt,
Thank you.
Vanna Munt has these, but if you take them, it's in red, the changed dates, and if you need them, they're on the back table back there. Thank you, Vanna.
Normally we have the mindset it's 2 weeks from today, so please take one of those home, and we still love to have you here on those days. So we'll start the questions. The first question comes from Brent Welsh. What's the status of SF 2225, formerly SSB 3044, the requirement for certified athletic trainers at high contact athletic events? Any possible amendments to waive if EMTs need to be present?
let's say this, it's a work in progress. Okay, what you heard was a bunch of numbers. This is a bill that says, I think everybody knows there are significant problems with kids and adults involved in sports and the whole issue of concussions. And if you're injured, if you're hit really hard in a football game, and somebody said, and you're, in particular, if you're a kid, you kind of go, I want to get back in the game, I want to get back in the game. And there's this whole concern about sending people that may have had a concussion back into a game, and then later finding out, death or brain injury or really significant problems. So that's been an issue. You've seen it with professional sports nationally. You've seen that talk. So this was a bill brought out of committee. The guy that brought it out, his name is Todd Bowman. He's from over around Macokota, Iowa, and he's a wrestling coach. And he's very concerned about this issue. So he brought a bill out of committee that set up a set of requirements if you're going to have sports that involve contact between players and significant danger of concussions. You're going to have somebody there at whatever competition it is, have somebody there to help evaluate whether or not kids can go back into games or whether they should get treatment, all that kind of stuff. This is very much a work in progress. I would say, I think it's unlikely that bill goes to conclusion this session of the legislature, but it is an incredibly serious issue. And lots of kids are injured, and lots of adults are injured. You hear about professional sports. Many believe Muhammad Ali's Parkinson was partially caused by concussions over time. So it's a serious issue. A lot of discussion about will this become law this year. I kind of doubt it, but if you have suggestions on amendments to it, feel free to communicate with any of us at our email accounts, and we'll pass that on to the people that are directly involved in working on the bill.
You have a follow-up question, Brad?
No.
Next question from Jim Anderson regarding smoking. For the sake of casino employees, is there any activity to ban smoking in casinos?
Little or none.
All right, Jim, do you have a follow-up question? All right, Jim.
I'd add, it was obviously the subject of much discussion when we passed the Clean Indoor Air Act. And I think on 3 different occasions, one chamber voted to have a prohibition on smoking in casinos, and in the end, the conference committee decided not to do that. It's not an easy issue to get back to. Lots of political pressure on that issue on both sides. So there is activity, but probably not a path to that happening this year.
Okay. Do you have a follow-up question, Jim?
No.
Okay. Our next question from George Gillespie regards SF 2051, the Death with Dignity bill. Does it look like it will get to a vote?
Again, probably not likely this session. We had a fairly high-profile suicide in Des Moines of a former insurance company executive, CEO, who had retired and leapt to his death from the 22nd floor of the plaza in Des Moines. There are issues about people that are gravely ill, have little likelihood of surviving very long, and who believe at a certain point when they can no longer relate to family or friends or relatives, that they think it makes sense to allow them to take their own life. This gentleman had been in contact with the Hemlock Society, which is an organization that promotes the right, I'm not sure whether to call it right, but that promotes the concept of allowing people to take their own lives under certain circumstances. This bill has some protections in it. Obviously, one would always argue whether those protections are enough. This gentleman found a way to do it. Found a way to do it without a law, but obviously a very, very serious subject. Is this going to pass? I think it's highly unlikely that it will pass, but there are, I don't know, 10 or 15 states that have allowed for that possibility with people, so some have brought it up for discussion, and it was actually kind of interesting that we just, before David Hurd committed suicide, this legislation was introduced before that, and it's a fairly high-profile case. And I went to his celebration of life a couple of weeks ago, and he was actually a pretty good friend of mine. So it is a sad circumstance, and I just don't quite, I don't think Iowa is ready yet to figure out if we want to go down this road. So it's unlikely that will go to a vote.
All questions? No. Okay, our next question comes from Sue Pridemore regarding Medicare and Medicaid. Any local plans to help out our children that are in the system get through their prescription nightmares?
Well, on April 1st, of course, is when the modernization takes place. There are telephone numbers established. I don't have to have that on my piece of paper, but if you want to contact me after I'll be happy to make sure you get into contact with the people who can help you out.
I would echo that. I mean, I think we're going to deal with this for a number of years, the problems inside managed care. I would say the pharmacists, in our legislation last year, there was language relative to pharmacies and pharmaceutical reimbursements and that kind of stuff. And there was some dispute late last fall, some dispute about whether or not the rules were going to respect what the legislature had passed. That has been negotiated through, I believe. The pharmacies are largely satisfied with what they have. That's the pharmacies, that doesn't mean you are. So it behooves everybody to make sure you contact us when you have problems with this. But I would tell you, I'm already getting lots and lots of phone calls and emails on this subject. It is a very messy subject. I continue to believe we have rushed this transition to managed care. I continue to believe the estimates of savings are wildly exaggerated, and that this is going to be a problem. And in the end, the only way it's going to work is by denial of service. So people will get less services. Providers will get less reimbursement. The only way this is going to work is that way, because Iowa's already lowest in the country on reimbursement rates.
I do have the number. It's 800-338-8366. And one of the ways in which that we project some savings is that there are, among the 3 providers, there are over 70 wellness programs that help people become take care of their health a little bit better, with medical homes, getting them to the doctor's office instead of going to the emergency room, which is a much more expensive way to treat a problem. So, and again, we cannot exactly know what the savings will be. I think both the House and the Senate have budgeted $111 million in savings. So we're going to move forward. We're going to see what happens. We're going to do our best to oversee the entire system and make sure that people are receiving the care they need.
I would ask if you do that situation, phone calls is fine, but if you have access to email, you can email me or us, then I can send that on the right story, I guess. If you send it to me, then I get the right story, and it's not left to interpretation of me passing it on and missing a vital piece. But if you can do that, I've done that with a few people that have had some problems working through this, and then for the most part, we've been able to get them, for the most part, resolved. but by having that on an electronic system, I can get that sent, the exact problem, to the people so they can address it exactly, and they can also have that in contact information for those people to get back to. So if you can do that, that's extremely helpful to do it that way.
I too have concerns over this. I've been receiving a lot of emails. We need to set up an oversight, strong oversight on this. I think we're going to be lacking in that area. But please contact me if you have any problems.
Sue, do you have a follow-up question?
I'm Sue. I do have a follow-up question, and that is, would you all please introduce yourselves, because this is my first time here and I don't know you guys, so that I know who to ask a card for?
Yeah, I'm Greg Forrestal. I represent District 22.
Thanks for reminding us to introduce ourselves. My name is Mike Grunstall. I'm the state senator that represents almost all of Council Bluffs and Carter Lake.
And I'll reintroduce myself. I'm Charlie McConkey, I'm state representative for District 15. That's west end of Council Bluffs and Carter Lake.
I'm Tom Shipley, District 11, which includes 2 precincts on the east side of Council Bluffs and almost all points to the east.
Excuse me, I'm State Representative Mary Ann Hanusa. I represent House District 16, which is roughly the eastern and southern portions of Council Bluffs inside the city limits.
Thank you.
And I would add, we can all be reached at kind of the same email account. And that is our first name and our last name. So it's Mike.Grunstall or Greg Forrestal at Legis, that's Legis, .Iowa, all spelled out, IOWA, .gov, G-O-V. But take any of us, and it can be Mike.Grunstall or Michael.Grunstall, and that probably gets you to every one of us, or it bounces back and says you misspelled something. So.
And I also have a flyer on the table with all my contact information on it, and also you can sign up for a weekly newsletter, so we keep in contact with you. So please take that.
Well, Sue, thanks for coming today and welcome. Glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Our next question is from Erica Steinspring regarding education funding. I'm concerned about the changes and delays in approval of educational funding. Can you share an update on the situation and your views?
The first bill on the second week out of the House was the education funding bill. We amended the Senate bill to 2%, and they declined to go with us, and so it went to a conference committee. I just talked, the chair from the House, Representative Jorgensen from Sioux City, I just talked to him last Wednesday in that regard, and he says he hopes that we get some sort of resolution. He's met with the Senate chair and this conference committee, and I think they both understand one another as to when that will come to resolution, hopefully very soon. And then when we get fiscal 17 done, fiscal 18 bill from the Senate is in line by the cabinet, and hopefully we can get to that. It's our plan to do fiscal 18 by the end of the year, end of the session rather.
I would say this, we feel the House number is inadequate. The House number is the House number is 2% allowable growth. For everybody wondering about what 2% allowable growth means, okay, so round numbers, Martha, we're at 6,500 per pupil. Is that about right? Round numbers, don't I think it's slightly less than that. Okay, so 6,500, if we give 2% allowable growth, that means you get $130, right? 1% of 6,500 is $65. And so 2% would be you get $130 per pupil, okay? So classroom of 10 gets, how much? $1,300, okay. So that's what allowable growth does. I'm gonna get lost in decimals here before too long, okay? But, and that's what we said every year, and then for the last 5 years, we have, the state has, the formula would have some of that be on property taxes and some of that be on state dollars. We funded that. The House is at 2%, the governor's at 2.45, the Senate has passed 4%. Let's be clear, I apologize, Greg, but they were supposed to pass it last year. We were supposed to pass it last year. We did. We passed allowable growth on time last year in the Senate. The House never took the bill up until this year. So we're supposed to be setting this for 18 months out, not for 6 months out, not for next fall. But that's what we're on right now, is next fall. Okay? So we're trying to get our job done more than a year late at this point on this fall, the fall of 16's allowable growth for schools. But we're supposed to be we were supposed to be already done with that last year by 30 days after the governor's budget address, and instead we're still trying to do last year's job. Okay, and I would say the Senate has followed the legal timelines, and we have acted by our date. We have a two-house system. Both houses have to figure out a way to work together on it. So, all of that said, it seems pretty clear we're not going to get to 4%. So here's where I start to hesitate, and the House is at 2%. So I think it's safe, but I don't want to start negotiating right here in a public way with all of you guys. So I'm just saying the number's going to be somewhere, I believe, between 2 and 4%. Okay, that's the reality, and we are working hard on that. But not inappropriately at this point, both sides are saying, okay, what are state revenues? How much are state revenues going to be? And this whole question of whether or not we couple by the way, one correction for Mary Ann Hanusa in your opening remarks, you said take the tax break away from people. Well, that's a little deceptive. When you couple, this is on people that it's on the question of you buy a piece of equipment that has a lifetime of X number of years in terms of depreciation schedules, right? It's going to last 5 years, 7 years, some things last 15 years. They depreciate it over the years, and you get money back each year on that. Nobody's talking about taking the deduction away. The question is, do you get to, quote, expense it all up to $500,000 under the federal law, expense it all in that first year. So over, let's just take an arbitrary number, it might be different for a few things, but over 10 years, the taxpayer will get all the same money back either way. It's a question of whether they get it all up front or spread over X number of years. In most cases, the years are 5 to 7 years. So they're going to get it all, and the state is going to get all of the revenue at the end of 10 years. It'll be the same money in and out regardless. Okay, so it's not that not doing it takes the tax break away, but it does delay it. And at some point, that does in fact cost people money. But it's not that we're doing away with the ability to have people deduct depreciable expenses over time. It's a question of how much time they get to do that. So, until we kind of know the parameters of that and what that impact is on the general fund, and to their credit, the House has offered to pay for at least part of that expensing, which would cost about $96 million, to pay for at least part of that using ending balance money from this year, which we can't spend on anything else. It's just how much money we're going to have at the end of this year. We're going to have $240 million. If we took $96 million of that, use that for this purpose, that would free up additional money next year for next fall. So once we get the decision on that finalized, we can then pretty quickly move to a number on allowable growth. okay? So I think within the next 2 weeks, you'll know. But the confounding factor was, in addition to that issue that we kind of knew was going to be on our table, we kind of expected, we weren't sure, but we kind of expected the federal government was going to do this. The governor, by administrative action, by administrative rule last fall, gave away as much as $100 million. And that's a challenge as well. And I understand, and I think at some level it's a good thing that businesses get to walk into the governor's office and say, we'd like some help. And I think it's good that the governor's responsive. I just wish when a school kid walked into the governor's office and asked for some help, he was as generous.
Well, that was a rather free-ranging answer. You say the governor gave, well, actually he gave it back because during the Culver administration, there was a change in the rules that grabbed that money. But, okay, let's go back to the original question.
That's actually not true.
Well, we'll see. Let's go back to the original question. What was the original question?
The question was, when are we going to know about school aid? And I tried to lay out the complication.
Oh, okay. The senator accused the House of being naughty. Well, last year we sent a bill over to the Senate for 2% for fiscal 17, and they did not take it up. So the Senate is just as naughty as the House.
And they sent it over at the end of the session, not 30 days within the session. This year, they chose to take up our bill that had passed on time. Your bill did not pass on time last year, Greg. It passed at the end of the session.
Does 2 or 3 months, and we're talking about 18 months in advance, does 2 or 3 months make a big deal? But besides, that is a very bad law.
And it's also very bad for us to ignore the law, and you did last year.
Well, just because, if you've not withstood the law in the past.
Yes, and that's legal to say, before the deadline, to say, this year we're not going to set a law. We're not going to change the law for 1 year.
Twice.
That's legal.
Twice sent over to the Senate a bill to correct that bad law, and you've refused to take it up. We're saying that it doesn't make any sense to follow what a mistake that a previous legislature made.
I want to just with the, now that we're all somewhat confused, I'm sure. But regardless, as far as school funding, I want to come up with an amount that we can live with and not have to come back 6-8 months into the fiscal year and say, oops, we can't do that. And 4% probably what would happen. Revenue Estimating Committee is going to come up with another number here in about 3 weeks. And I don't have any illusions that it's going to be better than it was in December. We talked about John Deere yesterday. They announced another 100 layoffs. And there's any part of the main economic driver in this state is not looking at real good times. So consequently, if we're going to come up with a number, I could defend 2% because I believe we can go ahead and provide that. 4%, I think, makes it look like it's really good, when in fact, it wouldn't be able to be sustained.
The education piece of the budget is not decided in a vacuum, and obviously there are many components to the state budget. We are required to take the Revenue Estimating Conference report from December to start our budget negotiations, but then there's another one that comes along in just a couple of weeks. If that number comes in not as expected or shows that state revenue growth is not moving as expected, then we have to adjust the budget accordingly. I was out in the lobby, or out in the rotunda rather, a couple of weeks ago, and I was just passing by, and I heard a couple of lobbyists talking about the school funding issue, and they were saying, well, I'm hearing that we may have to do a 10% across the board cut. And I thought, oh my goodness, is that actually entering into the conversation? Because I know I can remember being in the schools in 2009 when that across-the-board cut and came for all of the government, 10% across the board, which was an irresponsible thing, I think, for the governor and the legislature to allow to happen, because that hurts the most needy the worst. It is devastating to schools. It's devastating to every part of the budget, and we don't want to go there again. We don't want to be there. We want to responsibly work with your tax dollars to craft a budget that fully funds everything to the fullest extent that we can. The individual budget chairs in the House have been given orders, basically, right from the very beginning, by our new appropriations chairman, Tack Grassley, to basically go back and look at those budgets. Some have been cut, some have been told, most have been told, actually, you're not getting any increases, don't come to me for any extra anything, because it's not there. So I just, like I say, I just think we need to keep that in mind, and I know people, some people maybe don't want to hear that, but that is the reality of how we have to craft the state budget. And with regard to the coupling issue, I appreciate the senator's comments. However, the fact that the Senate has delayed on this bill is going to cause financial hardship to these Iowans who will have expected to file their taxes in a certain way, and they can't at this point.
Well, I actually, on school funding, I believe that's a good law, that we have to establish school funding 18 months out. Because that gives our school administrators or school districts, they have to plan their budget, their deadlines they have to meet. As far as, we need to set that first, make that a priority. I think education should be our priority again. We can always go back and adjust the budget, but I think our top priority should be educating our kids. Make sure they receive a quality, world-class education so they can compete. It's economic sense to do that, because that's a way to grow our economy. And there is a fine amount of money we have to look at. We have to stay within our budget. But we do this all the time. I mean, we could put our priorities first, then we can adjust the budget. It's going to be different, it isn't going to be like stealing from Peter to pay Paul. I mean, we need to set our priorities and stick with it.
The problem has been is that we have adjusted the budget down the road too many times, saying this is what you're going to get, and then saying, just kidding. So we've got to go into it with being realistic, that this is the way the real world is working, and this is what we've got to work with. Because I've been involved in the school board when we did the adjustments made to the budget midway through the year. Not any fun at all. So let's not be telling people what they want to hear.
Well, I think we are being realistic. And I'm not telling people what they want to hear. I'm telling people where our goals should be. And I truly believe education is one goal. That's the reason why that law was put in place, to make it a priority.
Here's what happens when you follow that law. In 2009, legislature set allowable growth for fiscal 11. And then in the 2010 legislature, they did not fund it. So that meant there was a $200 million increase in property tax. $200 million increase in property tax. That's what happens when you follow that law.
I wanted to follow up just one thing that I forgot to mention, following up on Senator Shipley's comments, as far as some of the layoffs and things that have been happening. I chair the Economic Growth Committee, and I have been visiting with Debbie Durham the last couple of weeks. She has said, and actually reported in front of my committee when she presented a few weeks ago, that this is going to be the year of, as far as economic growth, of mergers, acquisitions, not necessarily downsizing, but really businesses looking at, businesses across Iowa looking at their consolidating resources, consolidating offices, not a lot of expansive. So I think, again, that's something not to be a downer, but that is something that I think we have to keep in the back of our minds knowing that that all affects the bigger picture of the state budget.
Erica, do you have a follow-up question? Okay, our next question, we have a perfect segue into that regarding small businesses from Jeff Jorgensen. I've noticed several small businesses in Council Bluffs have closed in the last few years. Are small businesses in Iowa in trouble?
In what regard? Just lifeblood or what?
Well, Romano True Hardware is one example, closed up shop not maybe a couple of years ago. Several eateries have closed up shop. Mary Ann, your hardware business, your famous hardware business has closed up shop. Is that something that is going on maybe at a tax level? I mean, the tax structure in Iowa is such that small businesses are having such a hard time of it. They're saying they're giving up. I mean, how do you guys view small businesses in Iowa that are in trouble?
Well, in 2013, we did make a change in the property tax for commercial property tax law, which is totally phased in, I think, in this year.
It finishes in this year's budget.
In this
The last
year's budget,
25 years of our
right.
business.
So that's part of what we've done, but you know, there's always opening and closures of business, and I don't know if we can point fingers at a particular cause.
I would say this, I mean, we fought long and hard. The governor proposed a commercial property tax cut in the state of Iowa and said it should be across the board. And Senate Democrats said, and he was proposing something in the neighborhood of $250, $300 million, and it'd be across the board. So every big box store in the world would get their share, but the little tiny small businesses would get basically crumbs.